Welcome back. I hope you've enjoyed the first two videos in this series. The first one about tools and the second one was all about how to pick your fabrics for our quilt. We are working on our Simply Rails quilt pattern, and this is a beginner quilt, so if you've never made a quilt and you haven't watched the first two videos, make sure you go back and check them out. Today we're going to talk all about how to cut your fabrics and how to cut them, how to prepare them so when you do cut them you get accurate cuts. The one thing about quilting is that you need to be accurate in each of the steps, because if you aren't, those inaccuracies can build up and then you will struggle putting your quilt top together. And it's really funny the little things that can throw you off. One is how you cut your fabrics. If you cut them a little bit short or a little bit wide, like in this quilt, we're sewing 3 strips together and it has to measure 6.5. If you cut these each a little bit wider, you're going to end up much wider than what you need. And you cannot always square up your blocks. And you will always have threads on your clothes. So today I want to talk about how to cut in general, but then also how to cut specifically for this project. Below the project, I will put the cutting list in the comments of what you need to cut for this project. There is no formal pattern. This is definitely a class through video project for you. And you can always leave questions in the comments. I'm checking them daily. If you have any questions or comments about the project or what we're doing, or you're not sure about your fabric selection, just either put it in the comments or you can email me at heidi@thewhimsicalworkshop.com. But let's get started on our cutting. So last week we picked all of our fabrics. So just to recap that, we have our outer border, our inner border, then we have our first set of rails, these 3, and our second set of rails for these 3. And what I'm calling rails are these guys. This is called a rail fence block. And when we get into cutting the blocks, it'll be much clearer why they're called that. It is a very, very basic quilt block. It is perfect for beginners, and to be honest, this was the first quilt that I made when I was learning to quilt, which is why I know it was really approachable for me, and I'm hoping it does the same for you. First thing you need to do is, if you have your cutting list and you print it off, you're going to want to put your fabrics in the order you are going to cut them. And then for today, that's going to be the outer border first, the inner border, the first set of rails, and then the second set of rails. I always stack them up in order because then I'm less likely to cut the wrong fabric. I go down the list, I mark each one as I cut it, and I stay organized. Staying organized in quilting, believe it or not, will save you a lot of headaches. So we're going to go ahead and get ready to cut our first fabric. The first thing you need to do, though, is when you get your fabrics, you can choose to pre-wash them all, or you can choose to not pre-wash them. There are 2 schools of thought on it. A lot of people will pre-wash them because they used to be because we wanted to make sure they were color fast and that the dye wouldn't run from fabric to fabric. That is truly not an issue anymore. Technology and printing fabric has gotten so much better. Very rarely do I find a fabric that is going to run on me. If I am even concerned, I will clip a corner off the fabric and drop it in a cup of water and leave it. Come back in a couple hours. The water is clear. The dye is safe. If the water is murky or colored, you know you need to wash the fabric with a color catcher or something to keep the dye from running. The reason a lot of people will pre-wash their fabric is because the fabrics from different companies, even from the same company but different collections, may shrink at a different rate. I have never had an issue with that. I do not pre-wash my fabrics, but I also enjoy the look of a quilt once it's been washed. It's all shrunk up, and it just looks more quilty to me. If you don't want that look, you want it to stay flat and pristine and not bunch around your stitches when you wash it, then pre-wash all of your fabric. I recommend putting them in a Ziploc bag or a zipper bag, a delicates bag, and wash light colors together and dry them. You're going to have lots of little threads hanging off. That's why the delicates bag keeps it from all knotting up on itself. So if you are going to pre-wash and pre-dry all your fabrics, and then you will need to press them. If you are like me and you are not going to pre-wash and you're going to live dangerously, then you can just go ahead and move on to this step. So the first thing I do is these have already been mostly pressed. I press all of my fabrics. I get all these wrinkles out. And how we do that, and this one actually lines up perfect for us. Let me switch fabrics here for a second. When you get the fabrics from the shop, you will get one edge. Well, you have two edges that are printed like this. This is the salvage edge. This is how they hold it onto the presses when they go to print this. And that's why you see the little holes. It's the little teeth holding the fabric onto the press. That's why they're called the salvage. You do not want the salvages to end up in your quilt. And I'm going to show you how I clip those before we do any cutting or before we get into piecing. But the first thing you want to do is you want to align, like this one, the salvage is not aligned. You know, this one is about 1/4 inch longer than this. You want to make sure that you align your salvages, and that is going to play havoc with this fold up here, which is a fold that is made from when it's being rolled on the bolt. It does not have anything to do with the actual fabric and how it's made. So you will have to first align your salvage edge, and then you will press your fabric up towards your fold, and then you will press your fold. Okay, this will align everything and make it much easier to cut. If this is askew, when you go to cut, it's going to cause your strips to be askew. We usually cut all of our strips on a fold, so it's folded in half. If this is not aligned properly, you will get a wave in your strip. And if you've cut anything and seen it, now you know why you're getting it. It's because your salvages are not aligned properly. And if those are not aligned properly, the fold gets messed up and then you get a wave in your fabric. So this was a nice, easy one. We were just able to align the salvage and press it. Like I said, the chicken fabric, the salvages already match all the way across. So that one is good. I'm trying to find one that's kind of twisty so you can see what will happen on the side here. Sometimes it's really skewed and sometimes it's not. And you do want to make sure when you buy your fabrics, if it looks like it's really skewed, buy yourself an extra 1/8 of a yard, because what's going to happen is those side edges are going to be uneven and wavy, and when you straighten it, you can have almost 2 inches excess on one side and nothing on the other. You'll have like a diagonal, and it's better just to have a little cushion. I know fabric is expensive, but a little insurance will save you a lot of heartache. So there is that one. Again, start at the bottom, work up to the fold, press it. This one is, okay, so maybe this one will do it. Yeah, so when I aligned the salvage on this, so it was like that, okay, and the sides were even, but the salvage was crooked. It's not a lot, but it's crooked. If I go like this to straighten my salvage and make sure that they're parallel to each other, you will see now I have about a 1/2 inch on that side sticking out and a 1/2 inch on that side sticking out. That is what I'm talking about. We're going to need to square this up, and you're going to want to even this out. So if this, say it was 2 inches and 2 inches, that's an 1/8 of a yard. So there's not a lot you can do when you buy your fabric in a quilt shop. They're usually in a hurry. We're trying to cut it. We aren't, not we. I don't work in a quilt shop any longer, but you don't always know what it is coming off the bolt. No one's trying to do it on purpose, so buy some extra. So that is the twist I was talking about. Had I left this alone and I cut that strip, we would have our wave. So that is what you do first. You press all of these, make sure your salvages are even, and then we're ready to cut. And like I mentioned in the first video, the tools you need for cutting, you're going to need a 6.5 or 8.5 by 24.5 inch ruler, or 24-inch ruler. So they sell them 6 by 24. Mine is 8.5 by 24.5. It doesn't matter as long as it's at least 24 inches long, and ideally at least 6 inches wide. It's a much better ruler size to work with. You will need a cutting mat. My table is a cutting mat, so I don't have a littler 18 by 24 inch cutting mat, but that is the ideal size, especially if you are going to be eventually going out and about and taking classes. The 18 by 24 inch mat is very transportable. It's probably the biggest thing you'll transport, but it's definitely, you can get it from class to class. So, and then you finally, the last thing you'll need is a rotary cutter, and I recommend a 45 millimeter rotary cutter, which is this size, not the big 60-inch or the little 28. This is the best size for cutting. So now that we have our fabrics pressed, we are ready to start cutting. And so to cut these, we need to put them back in order. Whoops, I missed one. And that one is straight, so we're good. Put these back in order, which is how we're going to cut them. Which is like that, and like that. So those are in order. So to cut them, the first one is our outer border. And I'm going to cut single layers today so that you can see how to do it. When you get more confident in cutting, you could lay up more than one fabric. You could fold this in half and cut 2 borders at once. But when you are first starting out and you have not cut fabric, I recommend you only cut 1 layer, which is one layer is 2 pieces of fabric because of the fold. Okay, so I have the fold towards me. I have the selvage away from me. This is my personal preference. I usually will cut with the fold towards me because I'm going to align a ruler along that. And because I've already taken the time to press everything, I know the fold is even. So the first thing you need to do is square up one end of your fabric so that you can then get straight strips off of your fabric. So for this one, we need to cut 2 5.5 by 34.5 inch strips, and then 2 of the borders are 5.5 by 44.5. Well, fabric is only 42. So the top and bottom borders we're going to need to piece. So I'm going to end up having to cut initially 5 5.5 inch strips by width of fabric, and then we can trim 2 for the sides, and I can piece 2 and trim them for the top and bottom. But the borders are later on in the project, so we don't have to do anything right now except cut 5 5.5 inch strips by width of fabric. And width of fabric is from selvage to selvage. If you see it in a pattern, it'll be WOF. Usually they'll have a chart at the top that says WOF equals width of fabric. Width of fabric is from selvage to selvage. The other abbreviation you'll see is LOF, which is length of fabric. And length of fabric is however long you cut it off your bolt. So in this case, this is 7/8 of a yard. It's 31.5 inches long. So length of fabric, you buy as long as you want. Width of fabric is always going to be selvage to selvage, and in quilting that is can be up to 44 inches, but I use 42 inches as my number I keep in my head. So anything over 42 inches, I know I need more than 1 strip. So a lot of information right there. All right, so to square up the end, you're going to use a horizontal line on your ruler, and I'm lining the horizontal line with the fold of the fabric. And I want to make sure you guys can see this, so let me slide this up here. There we go. So the horizontal line on the ruler with the horizontal fold of the fabric. I hold my ruler. You want to hold your ruler in place. I love the Creative Grid rulers because they have these sand-blasted dots or textured dots on the back, so it doesn't slide as much as other rulers. But my surefire trick to make sure my ruler does not move, and this is how I teach everybody to cut, is I use my hand on the ruler. I use my pinky on the fabric. See where my hand is? It's on the ruler and the finger is on the fabric. That means when I'm pressing against this, because when you go to cut, you're pushing this and it wants to slide, this little finger is a buffer. It's holding that ruler in place so it doesn't slide on me. And the trick about cutting is, where is your arm? Where is your shoulder? Beginner cutters will cut like this. Their shoulder will be up, their elbow will be up. They're out like this and they're trying to cut 90 degrees. And it's not. It's a very relaxed thing. You want to make sure that you cut almost parallel to the table. I'll do it sideways so you can see it. Almost parallel to the table. My arm and my shoulder are down. Okay? My finger is on the top for this rotary cutter. I have the ergonomic trigger one, the straight one. I will grab one and show you how I cut with that as well. But I have my pinky here, holding the ruler with my hand. My arm and shoulder are relaxed. I'm cutting at a lower angle. My elbow is lower, and I cut. Now I'm getting to the halfway point on my ruler. People will try to go really fast and slide through, and we don't want to do that. We want to move our hand up, stop cutting, move your hand up, and keep going. And there you go. And don't be surprised if the first time you go to cut, it doesn't cut all the way. It's normal, that happens. So next thing is you flip the fabric over. Squared it up, we flipped it over, and now I need to cut my first strip, which is 5.5 inches. If you go to cut your first strip, and your ruler is broken, in other words, you cannot read it, because, let me show you this is what happens. They try to cut like this and they can't get to the 5.5 inch line. It doesn't work. So I call it the ruler is broken. If that is the case, the problem is you forgot to flip your fabric. And in the beginning, that is a very normal thing to do, is to forget to flip the fabric over. So if your ruler is broken, flip your fabric and your ruler will be fixed. So now I can take the ruler and I can align the 5.5 inches line vertically with my strip, and I can align the horizontal line with the fold on my fabric. Those are both important, and you want them to line up, and if they do not, that means you didn't square up this edge right, and you have to flip it back over, square it up, then flip it back over and cut it. Again, do not get frustrated if the first few times it's not square. You're practicing a lot of different skills here. Holding a ruler, using a rotary cutter, figuring out the fold on your fabric. These are all things that can go astray when you first start. The more you do this, the better you'll get. You'll never think about it after like your first couple quilts. All right, so again, hand on the ruler, finger on the side of the ruler. Please note, my hand is nowhere near my cutting row is, where my cutting channel is. These blades are extremely sharp. They are a huge round pizza cutter razor blade. Keep your fingers away from it, and keep your little ones' fingers away from it if you have them, or cats, or anything, because they will cut. All right, now elbow down, shoulder down. Blade is up against the ruler, ruler's up against the finger. Everything is on the 5.5 mark. The horizontal matches, the vertical matches. We're ready to roll, literally. So we're gonna take this, cut halfway, move our hand, continue. If you're afraid you're going to move your ruler, you can cut halfway, stop here, and scooch your hand up kind of like the thing. You don't have to let the ruler go. Over time you will. Over time you will just put your hand in the middle and just cut, and it won't slide on you. But as you begin, that's the first thing. So we got one strip. Again, horizontal, vertical, finger, cut. Okay, so that is how we're going to cut our borders. I'm going to quickly cut the last few. The other thing I always recommend when you are cutting a project is, one, we're going to label our pieces. I will letter each fabric A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I do that on all of our patterns, and then as I'm cutting it, I mark the A's with an A marker, the B's with the B marker, and that way I'm less likely to pick up the wrong piece when I'm sewing. So this is the last one of these. So you can mark your fabrics a couple different ways. I have used these circle stickers. You can buy them. They're at the stationery store or Staples. They're just little circle stickers, and I'll write A, B, C, D, E, F, G on each sticker. And then recently, a friend of mine pointed these out to me, and now we carry them in our shop, and I will link them below. They are called alphabetties, and they are letters that are little plastic tickets. So we're not constantly going through labels. I punched a hole in each, and I put a safety pin on them. And then I'm going to, this is A, going to take my strips. Now the 2 side strips we need to cut to length. Length. And these 3 strips we're going to end up piecing later, and I'm going to show you that in a later video. But again, remember I said I didn't want any of the salvaged stuff in my quilt. I will stack these up. If you're not comfortable stacking them up, do them one at a time. But this is just a rough cut. We're not measuring anything. We are just cutting off the salvage, which on this side I can see it better. I'm going to align the horizontal with my strips so I can get a fairly perpendicular line and just cut this out. This is junk. We don't want this. Ugh, that does not go in our quilt. So these 3 are cut, and I will piece them later and show you how to do that. And like I said, this is fabric A, so I will pin my A on my fabric A, and everything for A goes on this pile. I only put 1 marker on the top of the pile, but all of them will go in the same pile. So these are ready to be cut, and these need to be cut 34.5 inches. And I am not going to cut them yet. A very good practice to do is to not cut your border lengths till you get your top together, because a lot of things are going to happen between these borders going on here, out here, and all of this being made. So it is a very good practice to not cut your borders to length till you can actually measure your quilt top to make sure that it's the right length. I am going to go ahead and leave these with their salvage so I know they're the sides, and they're going to go under the outer borders. And you noticed I folded the outer borders together, so I know these 3 go together, and these 2 are the inner side borders. So I'm sorry, these are the top and bottom borders are folded together, and then the side borders are folded together. They're all under A, but that helps me to pick up the right strips at the end. So on to the inner border. The inner border is cut, they're all cut the same. But again, I'm just going to show you one more that I cut, and then I'm going to show you just how I cut multiples. This is the other type of rotary cutters that you'll see, a straight handle cutter. This is the Olfa pink one. That's so cool. It's also 45 millimeters, but I want to show you I cut the same way. It has the same kind of radius at the top that you can put your finger on, but you do not put your arm up any higher. This one kind of helps you keep your arm in position, where this one you have to remember to put your arm down. Again, I am pressing. Ooh, I'm hitting something. And if you hit a needle or something with this, I'm not sure, I have a bump there, it can nick your blade. And then when you go to cut, every like 5th string will not cut, and that means it's time to get a new blade. Unfortunately, if you nick your blade, there is really no way to fix it. I know there's lots of sharpeners out there and lots of things that tell you they can fix it. I have never gotten my blade fixed. It's just better to just get a new blade. And that is the problem with this one. So one of the beauties of this rotor cutter, I'm going to change my blade because I just told you to change the blade if it has a weird nick. And I remember this was a gift to me from another quilter. They probably had a pin, didn't remember. So anyway, the quick change blades, that's what this is from Olfa, they're really, really wonderful. There's a red trigger on the back, it says blade change. And you just pull down the lever, the blade falls out. You take the blade off carefully, put the new blade on, put it back on the handle, and then you push that up. That's it. That's how you change a blade. And you want to discard those safely by taping them up or putting them in a container and then throwing them in the trash so that some poor guy or girl emptying your trash doesn't get cut. All right, let's try this now. Look at that. Okay. You see my hand holding the ruler, and it just slides through. So it doesn't matter which style you use. I tend to like the trigger style, but either one, you're going to keep your arm down and cut. Square up the one end, flip it around, square up the other end. Or not square up the other one, cut your other end. For the inner border, we need 4 2.5-inch strips. Again, we will cut them to length later. So let's just cut those. When I'm cutting for a project, I tend to cut all of my strips and then go back and cut my units, but you need to make sure your pattern is right before you do that, because if you do, you'll make a mistake. So So in the beginning, I recommend cutting it as it is written. Always read through a pattern first before starting. Things will pop out to you. A couple of the things that are number 1 and number 2 errors that you find in a pattern is the cutting will be, say, cut 2-inch strips, and the instructions will say sew 2.5-inch strips. That's usually an error, and you're hoping it's a 2-inch error, that you need 2 inches and not you need 2.5. So I do read through my patterns, just make sure they make sense, everything kind of is kosher. I write hundreds and hundreds of patterns, and we are all human, and mistakes can happen, and just a little extra insurance of reading through a pattern is always a good practice for beginners and beyond. All right, so those are our B strips. We're just gonna label those. Now I'm gonna show you how I cut multiple layers for you brave souls out there who feel ready to tackle more than one layer. So the next 3 strip fabrics are the flowers, the red dots, and the suns. For these, we're going to do strip piecing, which I will show you how to do next week, and I'm going to show you how to do a perfect 1/4-inch seam next week. But this week we're just cutting. So these 3 go together. We're going to make 13 of each block, which means we have to make 2 strip sets. I know this because I'm the designer of the pattern. This will be written down for you. You do not need to know this. You don't need to think, oh my gosh, how would I know this? That is usually the information in a pattern. So see, I didn't put the folds by me. So when you're cutting more than one fabric, the important thing to do is to make sure to align the folds on all 3 pieces. And this is multiple layers. Make sure that the salvages look good. Pat it all down. It'll stick together. Fabric can be a little sticky and grip to each other if you just push it down a little bit. First, we need to square one end of the fabric. Again, horizontal line on the fold, finger on the fabric, hand holding the ruler. And we're going to cut, move our hand up. If you stop your blade and then move your hand, you probably will not move your ruler. If you don't stop your blade and you try to move your hand and cut at the same time, your ruler's going to move. And you might get hurt, so don't do that. All right, so we've got those 2 cut, or we got that squared up. Rotate the whole thing very carefully. So I didn't pick it up, I just turned it. For this one, we need to cut 3 2.5-inch strips. I'm sorry, we're making 3 strip sets with this. So 3 2.5-inch strips. So I'm lining the 2.5 with the horizontal. I need to flip this so I have the fold at the right end. The more you cut, the less some of this you'll play. Everything I'm telling you is how to do it perfectly. The more you cut, the little less you'll do all these steps like aligning with the fold, because you get much more comfortable with it. So please do as I say, not as I always do, because I will revert and get lazy and do it the lazy man's way. So fold, horizontal line, vertical line, edge of the fabric, finger on the mat, hand on the ruler, and we cut. And I slide up and we cut. Now this whole set gets sewn together. This is a strip set, but it is fabric. This is fabric C, D, and E. So you can separate them if you want and label them, or you could put them in the order they need to be in and just fold them, and that's strip set 1. This is strip set 2. It's a little shortcut, so you're a little more, you're ready to sew faster. And then strip set 3. Now, if you're cutting a lot of strips, 3 strips isn't a lot, but if you're cutting, say, 10 strips, halfway through, you're going to want to turn your piece around and re-square it up, because it will slowly become out of square. And that's because we're waving it, we're moving it, we're swinging around. It can shift on you. All right, so those are the 3 of each color that I cut from C, D, and E. And that's how you cut 3 layers. So the last piece I'm going to cut here or last pieces I'm going to cut here are the last strip set. We only need to make 2 of these strip sets, so we're going to line these up. And it goes diamonds, green dots. Again, line up your fold. You've already straightened your fold when you ironed it, so that should be good. Sorry, my nose is itchy today. Okay, line that up. Now we need to square it up. I put the one on top that was already kind of skewed so that I know I need to at least cut a 1/2 inch. And again, just buying another 1/8 of a yard of stuff, if you're really watching your money, is still worth the investment because it's insurance. So we have this one ready. Hand on the mat, hand on the ruler, horizontal as aligned. And we're squaring this up. And then we're going to turn it. Oops, turn it this way. Ugh. My mom used to say, if your nose itches, you're going to kiss a fool. So next person I kiss, better watch out. All right, horizontal with the fold, vertical with the edge of the fabric, hand on the mat, hand on the ruler, cut. And we only need to cut 2 sets of these, so we only need to make 2 strip sets of these. All right, that's it. The last thing that I have already cut, so I won't cut on camera, is the binding strips, and those would have been 5 2.5 inch strips from your binding fabric. Again, I will put all the cutting below, but that is all our cutting. That is what we need to do for this week. And then next week, I'm going to show you how to set up a 1/4 inch seam on your machine, how I use a Clearly Perfect angle and a Q-Tools sewing edge to make sure my 1/4 inch seam stays accurate. And I'm going to show you how to sew your strip sets together and how to then cut your blocks from the strip sets. So that's a lot for next week. So this week was to just get your fabrics cut and ready to go. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, please make sure you like and subscribe. Please leave comments below and let me know how I'm doing with this class. If you have questions or want to hear something else about quilting that maybe I haven't covered yet. Again, I'm here to share my knowledge with you, and I hope that you are enjoying this as we go. So again, thank you for watching, and we'll see you next week. I hope you've enjoyed this video, and if you have, make sure you like and subscribe below. You can find the Whimsical Workshop on our website, thewhimsicalworkshop.com, and that has all links to all of our other social media platforms. Thanks for joining us.